in the house with the distinguished gentleman being the best grandpa in Connecticut right now in Norwalk with his grandbabies. We're going to talk all things Charlottesville, Albemarle County, and Central Virginia today on the program. I'm going to give him props now, and I'll give him props again. Sean Tubbs, who creates as much content as anyone in this community.
Right now I'm trying to create a check-in so I can check in.
Oh, you're checking in?
Yeah.
You're going to get on the Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I guess that probably would work.
We can help
you.
Oh,
wait, hang on.
Oh, you figured it out?
No, but I'll figure it out.
Take your time. Quentin Beckham.
This is content.
It's Quentin's birthday today.
Oh, happy
It
birthday.
is my birthday today.
Yeah.
Happy birthday.
And see, I'm spending it here with you.
Well, thank you for doing that. We'll thank you and salute you when the cameras go on. And Neil, before we start the show, are you doing all right, my friend?
Doing well.
Good. Do we want to wait for that check-in?
Oh, no.
We're happy to wait for you, my friend.
No, it's all right.
Judah Whitcower, we can rock and roll when you're ready. Good Friday morning, guys. I'm Jerry Miller, and welcome to Real Talk on the I Love Seville Network. Thank you kindly for joining us. A glorious Friday here. We're live in Charlottesville, across Albemarle County, Central Virginia, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world. Today, we're presented by Keller Williams Alliance. We say it loud, and we say it proud. Keller Williams Alliance. Studio camera. And let's start embarrassing the man right now. It's his birthday. Quentin, it's your birthday.
Why should I be embarrassed?
Quentin.
I lived a whole nother year.
How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. How are you?
We're doing well. Sean Tubbs, Neil Williamson, this man's birthday.
Happy birthday, and good to see you.
I'm so glad to be celebrating your birthday with you today.
And I want to highlight this because the bottle is on the table and people are already wondering what's going on here. This is a gift from Keith Smith to Quentin Beckham that he picked up at our studio.
It's a gift / bribe because he's like, I want to go out of town and I know it's your birthday, but can you show up here instead?
How did that conversation go? Were you hesitant to say yes?
I'm always hesitant when Keith starts asking for things, so there's often a hook in there somewhere.
Keith Smith is watching the program. Good morning, distinguished gentlemen. If you guys want to give some questions for Sean and Neil Williamson and Quentin Beckham, please put them in the feed. Gentlemen, where would you like to begin today? Do we want to start with supervisor compensation increases? Did you find that intriguing at all, or is it about darn time that happened?
Well, I mean, it's one of the things that gets said about counselors, I think it was Supervisor Liz Palmer, even before she ran, was that if you're going to attract new people to become supervisors, you got to pay them. You know, this is a 10% increase. It's still under $20,000 a year, which is, with as many meetings as you see and as many events you have to go to, or not if it's virtual, I guess. $20,000 sounds like a lot, but the job is a lot of a job.
It's very difficult to see how the folks that have a full-time job, as Ned Galloway does, manage. So what you end up with are folks that tend to be well-heeled, white, and retired. I know for a fact, because I have been in several of the same meetings, that supervisors have 3 to 4 meetings a day, even when they're virtual. Well, if you take 4 meetings out of a day, you've pretty much cost half your day. And if you're working a full-time job, it's very difficult to do that. So you're winnowing down the people that can run. The other option, of course, would be to spread the work over more people and have more supervisors. That perhaps would limit the number of other meetings necessary and increase the opportunity. That being said, last time around, we had 0 competition for the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors.
He's right. So here's the number. I'll throw it to you, Quentin. It's it increased from $17,311 to $19,042. The chairperson gets an additional $1,800 stipend, so only the chairperson would be over $20,000. The chairperson now is Donna Price, and she highlighted in the most recent meeting that the only folks on Board of Supervisors are old white people. which is
Well-
what you guys are talking about.
And this is an issue with the representative government. If you're going to always have this in a place where it's volunteer, you've created an intrinsic barrier to people that are already underrepresented and not stood up for. We talk about this all the time when we're talking about developments and potential buyers. There's people in the city that just absolutely have, city and county, they have no option to participate at this level in their municipal government. And yes, I'm in support of a bigger board, so long as it's an odd number.
Well, I've always said boards are better when they're odd.
Yeah, we have 6 in Albemarle County. Neil Williamson is a proponent of 7. Sean, before we go to the next topic, anything you want to touch on when it comes to the compensation?
Well, the compensation, I would say about just the 6 number is an interesting one because it is even. And of course, that means that you have all sorts of ties and things like that. So I think that by adding a 7th supervisor, that might spread that around, prevent that happening, and spread some of the work, as you say. But of course, do remember that this time like 4 months ago, the supervisors decided not to go that route. So,
Oh, no, those sitting in the 6 seats do not look forward to a 7th seat sitting with them.
Yeah, and we talked about that last week. Your thoughts, the wheels are turning there, QB.
I don't know, it just sounds like a political dodge. So long as I have 6 seats, I can kill anything without ever taking a stand for anything. And so I think the point of all of these local governments is not to stall things and pocket veto everything that comes through. It's to move things forward. And if we have anything that happens at all that's not bad, it takes forever. And time is something that most of the county and city does not have.
Keith Smith says odd is always better. He's watching in Norwalk. Mark McKinney of the Crozet Community Advisory Committee highlights a link of board members in Fairfax County. He says each board member receives annual compensation of $95,000 per year, except the chairperson who receives $100,000 per year. So the knock on compensation of that kind of magnitude or ilk, if you may, is the career politician.
Right, and Fairfax County also receives a staff person.
and it's also a million people.
Million people.
So I think that's another thing. Albemarle County is 113,000. So I think as Albemarle continues to grow and the population projections have that increasing, this is a conversation that will continue to happen. And of course, speaking of that, the CAC, is the CAC a good system to
No.
represent? Well, I knew what you were going to say, but
I mean, you do have CAC members watching right
Yeah.
now. And Mark
I
McKinney.
love the CAC members, I don't love the CACs.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think, just over the next 10 years, which will roughly be the discussion point or the discussion period for what do we want to be when Albemarle grows up, I think that's a conversation. I think you said a minute ago that it takes time for things to happen. To change that, it's going to take time and a lot of organization.
Well, go ahead.
I just think all that time builds up. There's a developer in Belmont that's been holding on to a piece of land for 10
2005.
years, trying to figure out what to do with it and presenting plans that are getting set aside. And you can't tell me that the people that end up finally doing something on that property aren't going to pay for all of that time. And so that's just one example. But as we move forward, the only thing worse than a bad decision is no decision, because it limits the opportunity for learning. We don't even have anything to point at frequently to say, we're not going to do this again because this went poorly, because we didn't try it at all. And so I think if we're going to continue to respond to a faster-paced world, we need a faster-paced government. And one of the ways to do that is to stop things from just sitting on the desk until they collect mold and dust.
Well said. Well said. What's the threshold though? Donna Price highlights that the supervisors are managing or allocating a $500 million a year budget to run Albemarle County. 20,000, let's just call it 20. It's actually a little bit less for the non-chair people. Is not a whole lot of money, as you guys have said, for the work that goes in. But what's the threshold where if you go to a point that you get the career politician and they don't start leaving seats or just going term after term after term? Do you consider raising the money and then doing term limits?
I want to push back on this.
Please.
We just had a non-competitive election. What's the difference between what we have now and a career politician?
Touche. Well said. That's very well said.
Well, I think in this case, over the course of, I've been reporting now for 15 years in this community. Neil's been here for about 20 or so.
17.
Yeah, that's close enough. That's closer to 20.
Are you suggesting Neil's older?
No, just
Not
he's been
my
doing
birthday.
this. Just yes, exactly. But just I would say that most people who do the job are people who care about the community. But sometimes you have people who are there because they're already looking for the next step. They're already looking for the next place they go. Those are the people I think that are not as good legislators because they don't care what happens in the 5 or 10 years it's going to take for something to get built. And I'm not going to name names, but of course then you have others who sit in their seats for a very long time. But if nobody challenges them, then I guess the public likes that.
Well, let's back up to what we were talking about before. What about the people that would challenge them if there was an opportunity to do so? One of the things that is really hard to divine are barriers to entry. So they last, they stick around for a long time, they're often unobtrusive and unseen, and who that might know the needs better, but the people that live in the space where those needs exist, aren't even capable of contemplating a run because they work 2 jobs, they support a family, and they probably have a lot to say, and they're never going to get an opportunity to have a voice.
Yeah.
What if this? What if, as a locality, Albemarle made the decision to pay supervisors the median income for the community?
Household income? Household income?
Median income
For one person?
for one person in the community.
Which is now, what is that, 112,000?
No, households are 111.
Yeah.
Household's 111, but it's a little lower.
Yeah.
But it's about $100,000. But would that be enough? And do it in such a way so that the problem is the problem is somewhat logistical. You cannot tell a future Board of Supervisors what to do. Mm-hmm. You can provide them direction. You can say, this is our strategy. But I believe that if you paid the median income, whatever that number is, to the supervisors, it would be enough to bring new candidates forward.
I just want to ask, though, a friendly amendment to that. Can journalists get paid that same amount? Pay attention? Because that's about double what I make at the moment. So I would, I might run at that rate. Gosh, I might run. I'm announcing my fictional campaign.
And seeing how much interest we've gathered from this table to do this, I think this idea may have some legs.
Sean Tubbs, he would be running for council. You're in the city.
No, I think I'm better off being a journalist. I'm better off writing about it because what I like doing is explaining the different processes because I'll go back to what I said. There are lots of people who care about this community. I'd rather have folks who want to see the community improve and work together with others to get things done. That's much easier when people have a basic education of how things work, how proffers work,
but
how zoning works, and also maybe how it doesn't work. But I think in a lot of cases, the conflict would be, that's a lot of money to throw into this. But of course, do think about how much money people make at nonprofits who get paid to lobby. Not that anybody at this, maybe one of us. Which isn't a bad thing. But do remember that, there's a lot of money in the system anyway in terms of people who are basically paid to stand up and talk to the Board of Supervisors or City Council.
So if you were running a corporation with $500 million as the annual budget, what would you be paying your directors, your board of directors, if there were 6 of them?
They'd be paid more than $20,000 a year.
Would they be
considerably more?
Would they be paid $100,000 a year?
Yeah, I'd say they'd probably be paid in that ballpark.
And that would be roughly what number we're talking about.
Yeah.
Now, this is not a business, but what I'm trying to do is increase the pool, lower the barriers for people's entry to do this, because I'm telling you, if I'm an employee in a business, I can't take 4 meetings during a day and complete my work for my employer.
No.
It's just not feasible.
Your employer wouldn't let you do that.
Not generally speaking, no. And there has been one black member of the Board of Supervisors in my tenure, Kenneth Martin, and he told me...
Vacation, that's where you use this line. I know you well.
He told me he got 2 weeks vacation every year. He's a state employee, but he had never taken a 2-week vacation because he used up most of his vacation doing the during the day board meetings.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So I'm doing this big research project at the moment, looking at other governments throughout the 5th District, and it's interesting to see that there are places and places that are about the size of Albemarle or just a little bit lower that still only have 1 meeting a month. Perhaps a lot of it would be to look at, okay, why do there need to be so many different meetings? Because I think in some of those cases, more meetings doesn't necessarily mean efficiency in the business of doing government and making decisions.
Or does the requirements, when you talk about bringing on an employee, you talk about their compensation and you talk about what they're going to do for you. Perhaps you reduce the ask of what you have them do for you to match the compensation.
Yeah.
At this point, we have members of the Board of Supervisors sitting on so many different authorities that could be staffed by staff rather than a supervisor. And that would reduce the burden, the meeting burden. That would also take away some power. And I'm not certain the Board of Supervisors wants to do that. Remember, in Albemarle County, we have a county executive form of government whereby we don't have a strong chair which runs the government. You have a county executive that runs the government. He works for the Board of Supervisors. So it's important to recognize that, and it's easy to take a look. I've got a list here of all the boards and commissions that are in Albemarle and Charlottesville.
Wow.
that
You came
have
prepared.
I came prepared. And about half of them have some level of interaction with the board or council. And some of them, about a third, have council or board members sitting on them. Is that a really good use of those people's time?
Well, it depends on what some of those boards are. Some of them are boards that actually have to make decisions, such as the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority, which have to make serious budget decisions. Others are ones, and I think that we saw last year that one of those boards, the elected officials, kind of went off. The Charlottesville Convention and Visitor Center, CACVB. Well,
CACVB.
Well,
they're down to one, right?
somebody suggested they should have never been on there in the first place.
Yeah, well,
freeenterpriseforum.org. But you're accurate. But at the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority, if the elected official that's serving there does not agree with the corporate position of the entity they're representing, they have to resign. And that has happened. That happened with Dave Norris, as I recall.
I got to go back and look at that. But I do, hold on.
Because the board took a vote.
I'm sure that many people don't want to go into the total weeds of Rivanna Water and Sewer
but
Authority
the idea
but I want to
is,
talk about that.
I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about the idea, the representative of the board or the council are representatives of the board or council. When there is a political decision to be made, they must represent the board or the council position, maybe not their own personal position.
Yeah,
and a staff member could do that.
But I was back to being in a position, though, I remember when they added the elected officials to the Rivanna Water and Sewer Authority, because I believe when I started, that didn't exist. And there was some, just for the listeners or readers, or are people watching this readers or listeners?
I call them viewers.
Viewers, that's the word.
Yeah.
That took a second there. There was a dispute between Albemarle County and Charlottesville about how to proceed, and that was a good place where you saw that, officials. Now we could talk about this.
We don't need to do that.
There's another. I do have another topic. He wants that.
But wouldn't this all begin at the Board of Supervisors or the City Council? Wouldn't all of these changes you're talking about begin there? We live in a commonwealth for the common good. Is anything about our elected officials common? Are they the median representation of who lives here?
Well, they're the people who get elected.
And is that even possible?
But do they have to be that? I think to represent someone, you don't have to be that person.
No.
What does that
but
mean,
it would
Neil?
be nice if there was one.
You don't have to be reflective of
deep.
the citizenship with your look and demographic?
If I was elected to something that I would never be elected to, I would represent men and women
there's a
equally,
list of those.
even though I'm a man. That's all I'm saying. You can do that. That being said, there should be diversity of thought on all boards and commissions.
And do you feel that diversity of thought is currently present?
I feel there is a limited diversity of thought, as has been evidenced by 3-3 ties.
Yes, the Board of Supervisors, it's a little hard to read, I think, because we're still getting used to in-person meetings, and the dynamics are going to change a little bit again, I think, but that's a whole different thing. But in City Council, there is definitely a 3-2 split that I would say at the moment, which is a really interesting one to see at the beginning. Now, remember, they're all Democrats. On the Board of Supervisors, they're all Democrats, but there are definite
we're seeing
differences.
Wade, Snook, and Pinkston voting kind of as a block these days.
I would say they would tend to be more centrist, whereas the other two would be much more progressive, appearing, for instance, at Bodo's for that, to represent unionization there, for instance.
Don't get me started on that.
And,
that burned me up, man.
But, that's who gets elected, and I think that's who got elected. So there is diversity in the city of Charlottesville. In the county, I think that's a little different because it is a very, it's a pretty good running ship in a lot of ways, or it's a running ship and it's running in a direction. The question is, could someone get on that board and change that direction, and that's maybe for next year. I'm not talking about next year yet.
Yeah, I think that's wise. But you may want to talk about, what you may want to talk about is our newest planning commissioner. Do you want to speak on that?
Yeah. So, I think that one of the people who was also in the running is maybe watching. So, so the supervisors selected Lonnie Murray. Lonnie is somebody who I've known for many years.
He's come on the show many times.
Has he? Well,
yeah.
But, now he's going to represent the Whitehall District on the Planning Commission, replacing Jenny Moore, who resigned in April. Lonnie is also an elected official himself. He's on the Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District. Say that 3 times fast. And it's, I was hoping someone would try. No?
No.
SWCTA. So he will be on, and it's very interesting because he will definitely be a counter voice to development, and I'm saying that kind of laughing because he has some interesting views.
Very vocal opponent to upzoning and the future land use map in the city of Charlottesville. Very vocal opponent to density and development. Very pro land use and land rights. Very strong environmental. Lonnie Murray. I welcome his perspective to the Planning Commission. I think it's a very different perspective that's currently on there.
But it'll be interesting, though, because so much of the position is less about ecological and preserving, because we have this growth management, there's a lot of work that goes on in the growth area. So it'll be really interesting to see him getting into the details of that.
Yeah, because oftentimes people, and the beauty of Lonnie coming on is, first and foremost, he's a thoughtful person.
Oh my gosh, very.
He and I have disagreed publicly
I think Lonnie is watching right now.
on a number of issues, but
nothing.
that being said, he is a thoughtful person who knows which way is up. Now, the idea of development in the development area and increasing density, I had a conversation with a builder the other day. We were talking about the water quality and how significantly better the water quality is coming off a particular development today than it was when it was raw land. And that is a very real scientific fact. Now, that requires some pretty good stormwater management stuff, but, and I'm not an engineer, but I will say that those opportunities are the kinds of things that Mr. Murray understands. While he doesn't like, the burying of streams and the like, if you're going to put houses over it in your limited development area, and you mitigate it in such a way that you improve the stream quality downriver, I think that's a net benefit. And I appreciate him being willing to put his hat in the ring, as I do the other 2 individuals who put their hat in the ring for the Whitehall District.
And the other 2?
I was
Mark
Sean?
McKinney.
He's watching now as well.
And somebody whose name I don't have in front of me.
I don't have the third name in front of me.
Elizabeth Walkneister, I think.
I think that's right. Sean's much better with the memory.
And I'm staring directly in the camera.
I
as
see
was
that.
told to, so I.
You can look at us too if you like.
I can't. Nope.
Okay,
just
you're
the camera.
glued to the camera over here.
He's not going to look at us.
He's not going to look at. That's completely cool too. We love Sean Tubbs.
I'm wondering if it's going to blink.
Well, and yesterday, Sean Tubbs broke a story. He scooped everybody.
Yeah.
And you want to tell us about that story?
Look at Neil.
Wow,
I
he's
like
running the
that.
show.
I know. I love it.
You can take a break.
I can. I'm happy to.
Refill my coffee.
We don't have a coffee maker.
Oh,
we do have
man.
a coffee maker. We do.
I'm fine. I've had
It doesn't work. Trust me, I've tried.
So, I think, and this is, plug for me, I'm a journalist in the community, and being able to continue to report on things years after I first started is really exciting. Not only I was there, and you were probably there the same night in September of 2007 when Hollymead Town Center was rezoned by the Board of Supervisors. Do you remember that?
I do.
What else was rezoned that day? Do you remember?
I don't remember what else was rezoned.
Biscuit Run.
I thought Biscuit Run
Yeah.
it was a big night. It was
a
long
really
meeting.
big night, September 11th, 2007. Anyway, as part
Was
of
that the last major rezoning they ever did? It feels-
No, gosh, no.
That was a joke.
It might seem that way. But 15 years ago, but as part of that, the developer at the time, who I think was Octagon Partners, they had agreed to contribute $50,000 a year to transportation, public transportation, and this is what's called a proffer. And of course, that proffer just sort of sat there. Wendell Wood's development firm repurchased the land at some point and decided to develop it. That's where the Kohl's is today. Flash forward to 2014, or 2015, I think. Yes, it was late 2015. Brad Sheffield sits on the Board of Supervisors, and he's also, I think at this point, he's executive director at Jaunt. And he suggests...
How did that go?
He suggests, hey, we can use this this transit proffer, and we can bill them, we can just put it in. They have to pay. They have to pay. It says right here in this proffer.
This is an asset.
Yeah. That was it. Actually, the court case didn't say. Which person was that? Sorry.
I've lost. I didn't bring
Gotcha.
those documents with me, but
And Wendell Wood sues, and of course, but then the transit line starts to operate in May of 2016.
Back up. What transit line?
Jaunt.
And
Yeah.
was it a transit line?
Well, that's the thing. Is it a transit line? Is it a fixed route transit? Or is it a commuter service? And these details in what's called plain language text matter. And in this case, Wendell Wood even said, look, I'll pay you less. I'll contribute to this commuter service that you're putting in, but it's not what the proffer says. And the county says, well, we disagree. They send them a bill. Wood refuses to pay. The county says, zoning violation. Flash forward to now, actually, Judge Cheryl Higgins had said she sided with Wood, essentially, and said that the county, this isn't really the exact thing. Actually, I know that these words come off of Neil's head very easily. There's some jargon here that I'm thinking of, and they're important words.
You're talking about being directly related to the development.
Oh, but say the fun science fiction one.
No, go ahead.
Nexus.
The rationale
Rationale.
the rationale behind the lack of nexus for the transit proffer is that the transit, as was put forth by the county, was commuter service, which picked up between 7 and 9 a.m. and dropped off between 5 and 7 p.m. Did not run on Saturdays and Sundays. The nexus was that this was to alleviate traffic concerns from the shopping center. Well, the shopping center isn't open that early in the morning. Harris Teeter is. And they don't run at all on the weekend, which is when the traffic is the worst, or the most generated traffic is from the shopping center is on the weekend. So those two things don't match, is what Mr. Wood argued as the plaintiff. And in the end, the courts agreed this is not a transit. The board looked at it as an asset and a pot of money that they could get to fund something they wanted. Mm-hmm. And it was not reasonable, rational, and had no nexus to the development that occurred.
Nexus.
You want to add to that?
No, well, I mean, yeah, so the Supreme Court basically had a ruling yesterday that sided with Judge Higgins. And so, but the thing is, the Route 29 Express has run anyway ever since. So it looks, but the county did not collect on that funding, and I'm guessing Jaunt has not paid on that. But it was, I don't know if it's been successful, but they're still running it, and Jaunt has other commuter services that they run. It just turned out that this was not a good way to fund it, and of course, whose idea was it? And I think maybe we'll never know.
We will never know.
We'll never know.
That's news right there.
Which part?
What you just said. What you just relayed to everybody.
Well, it's not news that I know nothing.
Well, no. We know you know a lot. But what you just relayed to the viewers and listeners was certainly news there. I want to get to Michael Payne's comments about UVA on Facebook. I don't know if you guys read that. I was like, oh my gosh, this is... The guy's going after the University of Virginia here. Well, and we'll get to that in a matter of moments. Anything you want to add to?
No, I'm just catching up.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I have lots of commentary, but we're not there yet.
Sorry.
Okay, so Payne's comments on the University of Virginia. This is from a Facebook post, and I believe Counselor Payne is watching it. It's from a Facebook post 22 hours ago. Okay, I'm going to read 2 paragraphs from it. And then Dave McNair at the DTM picked this up and started getting it to go with some momentum on social media. So Michael Payne on social media, yesterday. UVA received plenty of press for pledging to build 1,000 to 1,500 affordable housing units. But did you know UVA plans to use none of their own money to subsidize this proposed housing? What I take that to mean, Michael Payne writes, practically, is that at some point down the road, City Council and the Board of Supervisors should expect UVA or the developer they choose to come before local government and say, hey, remember the affordable housing UVA pledged to build? actually, we need you to pay for that.
And you wonder why the Planning and Coordination Council was put on the shelf.
What do you make of his post right there?
Uh,
He's basically alluding to smoke and mirrors or pomp and circumstance from the University of Virginia
Can't find
when it's tied to affordable housing in the community, and using the news cycle as a narrative to say they champion affordable housing, and he's saying they are not.
I would say that I'd like, one question would be, and if I was interested in following the story, which I'm not, because in February he made this comment he asked this question straight at a Chamber of Commerce event, and essentially the response from UVA is generally, yes.
This was at Code.
Yes, but
Yeah.
do you not see how much economic development and money comes to this community that pays people's salaries, pays people's jobs? It's really simple to beat up the University of Virginia. Why? Because they don't have to be at the table. You can say whatever you want about them. Now, at the same time, that comment that they're not going to spend a dime of their money, well, what about the people who they have paid? They're paying money to the consultant to have put that project together. There is presumably things, but also too, name me one time the university has ever asked the city of Charlottesville directly for money. I don't think it's happened in the time I've been here. Now, there are certainly things, what he's asking for is a payment in lieu of taxes, which is a great idea, and certainly other universities across the country do that, but this is Virginia. Good luck getting that through the General Assembly.
Yeah, that's the tough part. So UVA is donating the land. That's
The
important to
UVA
emphasize.
Foundation is donating the land, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
another important distinction. It's important to critique the university, but it's probably also more equally important to critique it fairly and in a way that actually yields some solutions.
Okay, that's fair. I want to get Neil Williamson's take. Quentin Beckham, I'm curious of what's on your brain. I'm going to relay one more paragraph from Michael Payne that got picked up by David McNair of the DTM. And here's the paragraph. I'm going to read it verbatim. Then, Neil, you jump in. UVA pays no property taxes but would owe the city over $15 million a year if they pay the same rate as everyone else. That does not even include what they would owe to Albemarle County. The city also recently gave UVA Brandon Avenue for free, and a $5 million pledge UVA made to the city to help finance the West Main streetscape has vanished into thin air
It has
now
not
that
vanished
the
into thin air,
project is
though.
paused.
No,
So-
I've got a quote from the university from about 4 or 5 months ago saying, yes, when you get your act together and build the West Main streetscape, we'll pay you the money.
The West Main streetscape project was collateral damage of this budget cycle and school reconfiguration, so at best, it's on the back burner. I think we would describe it that way.
$10.8 million of smart scale money, which involves no city funding, would have come to the community had there been a council that knew how to steer their staff to get that done. We just haven't had that for 5 years. That's not this city council's fault. That's a project that was from before. It's tricky, but this stuff is complex. Now, did you know that the Board of Visitors is meeting this week, today, yesterday? Unfortunately, you know that storm that came through yesterday? It knocked out my recording, so I couldn't report on it today.
Man. And then you had to do this show. Damn it.
Exactly. Which is why I'm cranky. No, but I think it's an interesting idea, but it's also one of those things that will not happen without legislative support and a general assembly. Just like school construction, just like the sales tax thing, just like anything. It certainly would be good, but of course, I mentioned that thing about the Planning and Coordination Council. This was a body that was a public body that you could go to, and it was another board that disappeared. And it had 2 city councilors, 2 planning commissioners, 2 board of supervisors, thank you. And it was put on the shelf in 2019, and I'm not going to go into all of that, but there was a forum to talk about these issues.
But wait, doesn't that forum still exist?
It doesn't exist the way it does. It's now what's now called the Land Use Environmental Planning Committee, which is now basically staff. It's a closed-door meeting, which makes it more difficult for people who pay attention to know what's happening. They don't post their minutes properly. There was a meeting in late May that is not noticed it doesn't have to be noticed. My point is, the university doesn't have to do anything that one individual city councilor wants. Now, if there's a good ask, sure. Why am I talking about all this?
No, this is good. It's good.
I also think that UVA becomes this red herring kind of shield when city council can't make something move. It's a totally fair conversation to say that UVA doesn't pay taxes and a pilot program would work really well, and it's been proven to work in other places. When the city can't create affordable housing, it's completely unfair to point the finger at a big contributor to the economy and say, oh, well, ignore what we haven't done for the last 5 years, it's their fault because of the promise that they haven't made come true yet.
And it's also not necessary. Look how much the city has spent on affordable housing. $6 million to Piedmont Housing Alliance for the first phase of Friendship Court. There's a site plan conference, on Wednesday for a rezoning in Belmont for those 4 affordable units at the church. I mean, that stuff adds up. The 2 rezonings earlier this year. So, like, the city is succeeding. But the point, it's succeeding on one metric: is stuff getting built?
Right.
And have you been look down at South First Street, where there are buildings that have come up out of the ground in the last year, the first new public housing sites? And why can't we celebrate what we're doing instead of attacking each other and saying, well, they didn't do this, blah, blah, blah. But the whole point is, does that kind of politics work? Maybe it does. I'm not running for office.
Well,
unless you pay me $90,000.
Neil Williamson, you jump in here. Sure. I think, and I'm spitballing here, I think Michael Payne is positioning himself for a re-election run. He is extremely active in the community, especially of late. He's at so many events. I mean, I follow him on social media. I was talking about this with Bellamy Brown. It's exhausting just following Michael on social media, let alone doing the work that he's doing. I think he's making a position or positioning himself for a re-election run.
Well, or he's doing the job of city council, which I will agree that I've seen Michael. He was at the VDOT meeting with me the other day. He's everywhere. He's been a lot of places. Yeah. But I appreciate Michael for pushing. You push hard and you push the envelope. And maybe, just maybe, there's a way that UVA isn't the bad guy here. When we talk with the distinguished gentleman,
he's watching.
He talks about the need for land and the cost of land, and UVA has put forth land. What of a partnership perhaps with some land trust that might be around that would be engaged in this, and then have another party come in as a private builder and do portion of it, a significant portion as affordable, with the land trust's help that keeps it affordable? It's not, the reality is, for the first 15 years of my work here, UVA was not at the table. UVA is at the table. Now, Mr. Payne may not think they're bringing enough to the table, and that's fine. And that's a great way to push the envelope. But they're there.
Let's get Quinn in. Let's get Quinn in the mix.
Please, yes. It is his birthday, after all.
Yes.
It is my birthday. I think UVA, in the last 12 months, has completed about $706 million in projects, in capital improvements and projects. And I'm just curious, in the same period of time, the number of projects and developments that have been approved by the city and the county and that have moved on to completion. And I don't think it's a fair metric, because they operate completely differently, to pull up the problems that we have in our localities and lay them at the feet of UVA and point that finger. It takes attention away from what needs to happen here. It's not a fair comparison. And if anything, you should be doing your best to emulate and copy and get their help instead of looking the gift horse in the mouth.
Like it. For Keith says, and he's watching in Connecticut. So Keith Smith, guys, is with his grandkids right now in Norwalk. He says, for your information, one of the UVA parcels is owned by UVA. The other 2 are owned by the foundation. So he wanted to offer
clarification.
He wanted to offer clarification.
It's the Piedmont one, right?
I think the Piedmont one is. I think it is the Piedmont. Yeah. I think it is the Piedmont. All right, so let's put this topic to bed.
No.
We could go on if you want. One of our very astute viewers and listeners pointed this out to me, that the payment in lieu of taxes would, and you've already touched on this, would never make it through the General Assembly.
No, it could. That's the thing. It's like the whole point is, yes, it probably could, but you'd have to sell it in such a way, and you'd have to get UVA on board to some extent, which isn't necessarily impossible.
You would have to get more than just UVA on board, because if you had this system in place, it would apply to all 7 Virginia state higher institutes of higher learning.
And that's why it'll never happen.
Well, I mean, never say never, but I think but I would say that it is an interesting thing, but at some point, it's how, we have so many different issues where the city and the University of Virginia are kind of on hostile terms. One of them is a project, maybe not hostile, but they're not.
Friction,
for instance, the Emmett Street streetscape, which is an issue where that project has been held up in some places because of a right-of-way issue. It's been like that for 3 or 4 months now, and of course, that could be made to go away if there was a working city government and something to work out there. But wait, it's also, but wait, there's more?
There's also areas of agreement. We've just seen The observatory water treatment plant have a new 99-year lease. That was a point of agreement between the Ravenna Water and Sewer Authority, where they're working out easements for the pipeline that they need and then some of it's actually been built that coordinated with the work that they were doing out on the western side. So I think there are areas where things are happening in the positive. So I'm trying to cast it even keel here.
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly
I like
it.
that, Neil.
It's a much more nuanced conversation than just picking one thing and saying they're not doing enough or trying to shame them. Because in some cases, I can tell you right now that the University of Virginia is not in fear or quaking in fear of what Michael Payne has to say at this point. Now, if there were 3 Michael Paynes saying it in unison and a legislator who was doing it and maybe a couple others, then it might be different. And maybe it develops that way.
But I appreciate that Michael is pushing
Sure.
the envelope.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
appreciate that too.
But at the same time, I just, can't we all just get along?
Kevin Yancey in Waynesboro,
Where's my ukulele?
two-thirds of the employees at UVA require some form of city-state assistance, which is paid by taxpayers.
What's the citation on that?
Yeah, and two-thirds seems high for me.
Two-thirds a
Seems
lot.
high.
And also, too, an interesting thing you can do, thanks to the Cavalier Daily, you can actually look up anybody who works at the University of Virginia and find out their salary. I recommend that sometimes. It's fun.
Quentin Beckham, anything you want to add here? And then we got to get your take on the market, current dynamics.
I also think, yes, I'm sure there are folks that are employed by UVA either directly or through a contracted service that receive some sort of public assistance. I would be interested in how that compares to city workers and their employees, and making this an even conversation if we're going to do it. These are all the same people that live in the city and pay taxes and use the services and drive the economy. So you can't just pick one thing. It's a more complicated system than that. And again, I think often UVA is the nice big shiny target that a lot of stuff likes to get pinned to move the attention from where we could make a difference, which is in the local government.
Quentin Beckham, well said.
And if I could just finish by just saying, too, I will never defend the University of Virginia because I'm a proud Virginia Tech graduate.
Well, you're defending them now.
No, I'm not.
I'm
not defending anybody.
You're going to bat.
I'm a contrarian.
Let's make, you are a contrarian.
That's what I do.
Let's get your takes, and I'm very curious of your take on this, Sean Tubbs,
Uh-oh.
of Payne, Councilor Michael Payne, who is watching, Councilor Sina McGill, and Delegate Sally Hudson, leading, all right, why don't I say participating in the unionization press conference or rally outside Bodo's on the corner. Do you got a take on that? My take on it was I did not think local government should be involved with private business and the unionization efforts.
I need to look up and follow up on that. That's all I'll say.
I'm not of the same opinion.
No, you disagree. I know you do.
I firmly believe that when you're elected,
He has a take.
when you are elected, you do not give up your right to free speech, and you do not give up your right for things that you believe in. I may or may not agree with that position, but I do agree that they have the right to go down there and stand with them and stand up for the principles they believe in. And if you
As elected officials or as themselves as people?
I don't believe anyone said, I'm here as an elected official, but you can't separate the two.
Right.
So if you stand there, you are a member of whatever, that's fine.
Yeah.
I firmly believe you have the right and perhaps even the responsibility to speak your mind about issues of the day, whether or not you actually have direct purview over them. I think that is absolutely appropriate.
Quentin, you want to add something to this? What do you think of that?
I have no issue with it. In fact, I wish we had more unions. I think the world would be a nicer place for middle-class America if we had more unions. It's interesting to see what's happening across the country, and I don't know if it's going to really make any big impact. And I think it's one of those issues that detracts from the better work of the city council.
I would just say I appreciated the story because I learned how to look up the National Labor Relations Board's database to follow up on the process, because I think we are going to be seeing a lot more of these.
Yeah.
And knowing the process of how you actually become recognized is fascinating to me. And so I was just saying, when I said I wanted to follow up, I just want to see, I didn't see that piece of paperwork, and it's good. These are issues. And of course, you have two city councilors who have also called for collective bargaining. They have pushed the collective bargaining.
McGill and Payne.
Yes, ordinance. So this is consistent with that. And of course, it's diversity of thought on a council. You want that. It's not for me to say if anything's right or wrong. Well, I mean, I know I'm wrong, but
I think we're going to see a lot of collective bargaining. There's so many like marketplace dynamics all colliding at once with inflation, with affordability, with fuel. I mean, everyone's pinched for money now. So I think we'll see the collective bargaining, fortunately or unfortunately, much more prevalent. Neil, you wanted to add something. I can see the
I
wheels
just want to say that we just got word out in the last 12 hours. The economy added 390,000 new jobs
That's right.
in just May. But I see folks struggling to hire people. I think that you're right. The levers may be in such a position that the collective bargaining piece becomes much more palatable, and it may actually be a way of retaining workers, which is a fascinating dynamic that hasn't existed here in about 30 years.
Right. We're seeing it with Albemarle County teachers, Charlottesville City teachers. We saw it with Bodos. Heck, the people that report the news at the Progress are doing it themselves, and we want them to have success with that because we're junkies for local news. And there's 2 reporters we guessed or estimated or projected over at the Progress right now, and we would love to see more on the beats covering the news that matters. What do you make about the affordability issues we're having, Quentin, in housing right now? And are we seeing any additional inventory or any alleviation of this affordability issue?
So if we look at year-to-date, so through the end of May, this year versus last year, the median sales price in CAR's footprint, so not just the city, but in CAR's footprint, is up $58,688. The number of listings that sold this year versus last year, 443 fewer homes sold, which is in direct relation to fewer going on the market and affordability. And yet, even with that, the total sold volume was only down about $70 million. So I think we're seeing increased non-affordability, which is why I don't want to get into, forgive me, a pissing match with UVA, whether it's enough for them to give us the land or do they also have to put the houses on it. Take the land. Take the land. There will be a developer that will work with you and you can make some reasonable proffers. I don't know, maybe they get their own bus line.
that's a whole other show.
That's a whole other show.
Do we want to talk about that?
It's
We
going to be the
have-
queue line.
Okay, the Q
mean,
line. It's his
it'll be the
birthday.
Q line.
It's his birthday.
I'm really in support of anything that helps the middle class be middle class without the bar being $95,000 a year. Because if you look at middle class, what's the median income? We have so many people that have no opportunity to be middle class, and we suffer because of that. Our economy, local and national, is powered by a strong middle class, and we're destroying it. And so I think any opportunity we have to support that, to grow it, whether teachers unionize or not, they're not making a middle class wage. And we're concerned about that. We're concerned about the buildings, but we're not creating a system that has an opportunity to be self-sustaining and growing. We are creating a system that is a zero-sum game because you will not continue on this pace for forever. There is more than likely we're going to be told we've been in a recession for a while, a few months down the line.
No doubt.
And inflation has wiped out every gain in earnings that the average worker has made. What options do they have? They have to unionize. They have to compete. They have to find ways to make more money. And all of those people that have so much to say in government are not going to be able to run for city council because they don't get paid and they'll be working 2 jobs.
Nicely tied
Look at
back.
that, Quentin Beckham.
Nicely
Full
tied
circle
back.
right there for QB, the former CAR president. All right, let me throw this to you here. Back to Quentin, and then Sean, you jump in after QB here. We got rates rising. We got the dollar pinched for every household. We do not have much inventory on the market, although we're not supposed to highlight the inventory here on the show. That was distinguished gentleman telling us that.
Oh, is that okay?
Do we
That's-
see
Gentlemen.
the next 6 months of the year changing, or are they going to go as the first 6 months have gone?
Specific to what?
Well, I mean, prices continue to go up, inventory continues to shrink, and the buyer pool is there, although it seems to be getting a tad thinner than it was this time last year.
Yeah, the pool's definitely narrowing. And if you're paying attention to what's going on in the market, you're seeing a lot of price pressure. I don't know that I would call it a price decrease. You're not going to see a drop like you have because we're not in a bubble. The value is still there. It is supported by the low inventory and the demand. Go try to buy a new car right now. It's the exact same thing. So until we have a change in the inventory, you're not going to have a change in the value of the houses that exist. As mortgage rates go up and as inflation goes up, we are pushing more people out of the market. If you look at how much people are, like retail spending across the nation is up, but savings are down. That is symptom one of going into a recession. People are dipping in or they've stopped saving. Credit utilization is up. That's a potential symptom of that as well, because even with the high rates, people are doing what they have to do to maintain a standard of living and to pay a bill. So I think over the next 6 months, you're going to see the market cool off significantly in a way that matters at the macro level, but does not matter individually for somebody that needs to move and is going to sell their home.
Sean Tubbs, jump in here. Well said, QB.
I don't have anything after that. That was really astute and intelligent. Not what I've come to expect from this show.
Sean Tubbs. It's his birthday.
I know it's his birthday.
Why are you
that was
singing
good.
my
That was
boy?
like
No. I was saying
You were
that's
just
good.
giving me a birthday present.
That was awesome. No, I think it's. I mean, I can only think about my own habits, and of course, as I've said before, I'm sitting on an asset. I'm a Charlottesville homeowner, and of course, the pressure the whole last 6 months has been: is this the time? Is this the time? Do I cash in now? And I'm not saying what I'm doing, but it's still something in the back of my head. Is if I need to leave this market. Say I made Michael Payne really angry a few minutes ago. I hope I didn't, but
I don't think you did.
Nah, there's other people who probably are angry.
Well, he's
Yes.
not watching from home because he's my neighbor and our power's out.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Whew, phew. Oh wait, this is taped, right?
I mean, it lives on the internet forever.
Gosh,
Yeah. And Keith is tagging Michael left and right on the feed here, just so you know.
that's fine.
Okay.
No, I mean, I would say, that's exactly it. Because, but the biggest thing, of course, was I look at it from this perspective. What is my perspective as a Charlottesville landowner? I know that because I'm medium density residential, potentially I could have up to 8 units. Someone is going to take advantage of those 8 units and that capacity at some point in the next 10, 15, 20 years. Do I hold on to it and wait for that? Or do I cash out now when it looks like I could get a good windfall? Now, I think I'm sub-middle class at this point in terms of where I am because of...
Based on your earlier comments, I would agree with you.
Yeah, and I think, and I think that's kind of where I am at this point because, I took a big risk to do this work and I don't have to continue living here. I have a choice.
You could do your job not in Charlottesville.
That is in the works, but
Wait, so you're moving?
no, I don't know. I don't want to get into all of it, but at
Okay.
some point I will be leaving this market.
I know a realtor that can help you over here.
Oh, trust me, I've got lots of people who have said, "Oh, I'll buy it," but the question is, it's my home, and I think that's it. But knowing that future land use map and the potential density the potential worth, and tracking parcel by parcel the transfers, that's happening. I want to make sure that when I cash out, I'm not selling to somebody who sends me that little card that says, "We'll buy your home." Because I think that there are many people in this community who see that and they're like, "Oh, this is my lifeline," but they're likely going to give up on their future wealth. But maybe they have to. Those are those individual decisions you just talked about. I think there's a lot of people who are going to get pushed out of this community because, the cost of living in Lynchburg is a lot less than here.
And I think there's a couple ways this happens. One is just the cost of living. As energy prices go up, gasoline goes up, we're seeing a lot of price increases in groceries. All of those core sorts of things have gone up. I think the other way people get pushed out is they're in the home that they bought 10 years ago. Suddenly, there's $110,000 in equity that didn't exist in 2019, and they're used to a standard of living that they can no longer maintain. And so there's going to be a tendency, and it's going to be an easy knee-jerk reflex to go into a HELOC, to pull equity out,
Home equity line of credit.
to pull equity out of their home, not buy it. They don't want to move. They need to stay in the city. They're not you. Maybe they're
And I'm so
sub-middle
grateful
class
for them
plus.
that they're not.
Maybe they're sub-plus. They're not you, but because of inflation and because of pressures of costs, they're now drawing on this, let's call it pretend money, these values that have been created. what happens if we do really get into a recession and their ability to pay that back goes down?
Yeah, and I think that's a very real concern.
And so this is my local concern when we talk about how much more you have to make to just be middle class. Middle class people are also much less willing to give up their standard of living, and they have access to credit and are much more willing to go into debt to maintain their standard of living. And so from a local level, if we don't have ways to mitigate that, we don't have ways to pump the economy, if we don't have ways to make housing be less outrageous, you're at risk of creating a whole nother segment of citizens in the city and county that are in trouble.
And one way that the locality can make a difference is by approving projects and by increasing the number of units available. We have a comprehensive plan underway in Albemarle County, and we were speaking about it this week. The density that is, quote, allowed under the comprehensive plan, which shows a vast larger number than what would ever be approved. We did a study last year called Density Deferred, Density Denied that showed that it was I think it was 58% of the density was lost between the comp plan and the approved plans. And that was actually based on what the developer had asked for. This was mentioned at the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago, where they were talking about a project, 999 Rio, which the neighbors were very upset about because of the height. I believe that was cut in half, the density. So where you could have had small residential units right there on the transit line, right on Rio Road, and a commercial grouping, you now have larger, probably more expensive units going in that won't address that affordable housing need. People need to connect the dots. When you turn down density, you turn down the opportunities for the folks that don't live here and the opportunities for the folks that are renters here to get on that first rung of the home ownership ladder. Home ownership is not for everyone, but it is the greatest way to gather wealth. Home property ownership is the greatest way to gather wealth in the United States.
And create stability.
And create stability.
Household and community stability comes from home ownership. And when I say household, I mean the family.
But there is a movement in Charlottesville, and a lot of people would say that we should be prioritizing for the needs of renters. There were several people who spoke during the future land use map and said just that. You mentioned that Belmont Point development. I was really interested when that came back around. What you referred to earlier in Belmont, there's about, 6 acres or so right in downtown Belmont. Someone asked me to never say the words downtown Belmont again, so I like to add
downtown Belmont. Isn't there a big sign that says
there
downtown Belmont?
And actually, I've checked with the city. The reason I'm going to continue to use the phrase downtown Belmont is
because it annoys this person?
No, it's because there's a sign, and that's just how I call it. It's not really a downtown, though, is it?
I'd say it's downtown.
But would it be a downtown if you had more units there? The current proposal is to put 130 condos there, which I found to be much more intriguing than apartments, because that much home ownership in that area would be really interesting to change the dynamic of that neighborhood potentially. But there was one city councilor who was at the site plan meeting who said we should push for more apartment units and more residential, maybe subsidized potentially. And of course, we'll see what happens with that development. But of course, it'll be really difficult because there's no building permits for a while.
So I think the tough part about this argument is you're talking about prioritizing, and that's something that you can do. Pretend you're a fireman. You can certainly prioritize when you're sitting in front of a subdivision and one house is fully engulfed, one house is starting to burn, and the other one next door has screaming children in the window that are locked in. Then you have the opportunity to make a choice, and there's 8 other houses that are fine. Everything's on fire right now. There is simply not enough housing, and the rates at which we're climbing versus employment and income is climbing are completely unacceptable for any kind of short-term future. And so any conversation that wants to stall things or make things take longer, I'm just kind of opposed to.
But at the same time,
you need more rentals and you need more homes, and they all need to be more dense.
But at the same time, the neighbors who live next to those places get the right to raise their concerns, especially, like how it's more in the county, I think, than the city with this issue in terms of the school system. I think that's probably the biggest. There was actually a planning commissioner, Karen Firehawk, who said, it's great to have this density, but people care about the traffic in the schools. And, those conversations are going to continue. So some of that delay is the natural right of somebody to say, I don't like that.
Can I just say something that I think is a complete fallacy that people keep saying over and over? So I'm from Los Angeles.
Is this traffic?
Traffic?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm from Los Angeles.
But it's perception.
Now, other people get to finish sentences.
No, they don't.
The idea that density increases traffic
Oh, it's
is a
perfect.
complete fallacy. It is a lie. It does not play out in any of the research and the statistics. So you can talk to me about school systems, but I don't want to talk about traffic in terms of density.
But other people who go to meetings are going to bring it up. So when
But
you're
they're just
elected,
wrong. But they're just wrong.
and
but
when-
are you going to tell them that from the dais when
And
you're
when I
elected?
go to these
And are you
meetings
running-
talking about transit, they say they need a certain amount of density to make the transit system work. So, again, it's a yin and a yang, and how it all comes together. The piece that's missing often from the conversation is the market. Where is the market and what does it want? Does it really want the density that's prescribed currently in the comprehensive plan in Albemarle County? I don't believe it does, because when I've seen proposals come forward, they're not for the full comprehensive plan density. In fact, very few of the proposals that get approved at density X end up building out to density X. They end up running into environmental concerns at the site plan, they run into other issues, and they end up coming in at density Y, which is less than X. So-
And my other issue with some of what we're talking about is, yes, the neighbors have a right to say something, but between public hearings where you get to say your address and that gives you some sort of extra validity because you're the neighbor, and CACs, which I have to confess I'm in with Neil, I just think they should go away. The people that don't have the voice are the folks that need to live here because this is where their job is. And we're keeping them in a state of brittle poverty because they have to live 60 miles away and pay the gas prices. And they don't have any options here. And in that case, I would accept a priority of rentals with lower monthly costs to get people at least out of that first loop over housing. But I think we're in a space where we just absolutely need more doors that people can afford to occupy. And I'm not sure that I have huge opinions on what those look like.
But I think in this case, it's just interesting because Riverbend switched up what they're providing, that's all. That was the only reason I brought that up.
Riverbend, Capshaws, Allen
Riverbend,
Taylor.
the Belmont project down there, because I believe the first time it went, it was more of a City Walk type apartment complex that was about 200 units more.
Now they're the 2/2s now, aren't
Yeah,
they?
the 2/2s.
And to bring it to an application that just got approved this week, the land right behind the
Maplewood.
Walgreens on Prophet Road, there was a long discussion of concern by the supervisors. Not that this wasn't a good project, it was 2/2, it's adjacent to the Forest Lakes Townhouse community, which is on Worth Road, and it's a very sensitive design, but that it was taking land that was zoned commercial and converting it to residential. And that was a concern for them. And so that is something that, again, is a balancing act. How much commercial land do you need in order to gain commercial activity? And when you take commercial land out and make it residential, are you replacing that land and where?
John Blair, welcome to the show. We love you, JB. Jennifer Finazzo of the Sal's Cafe Italia family says, excellent lineup and happy birthday, Quentin.
Thank you so much.
It's from Jen Finazzo. Kevin Yancey has a question for QB. Kevin Yancey in Waynesboro says, this is 2006 to 2009 all over again. I really want to get your take on this. You follow a lot of the macro trends. I don't think you buy that this is 2006 to 2009.
I've been sick twice in the last month, and I had a fever, and my throat was scratching, I was coughing, and I was even on a show where I was just recovering from it, and I felt terrible because I couldn't stop coughing. And it felt a whole lot like COVID because the symptoms were the same, but it wasn't COVID. And that's the same thing.
I see what you did there.
That is the same thing that's going on here is this rush through the market, this burning up of inventory, this rise in prices, And this sense of inflation feels a lot like 2009, and it's just simply not.
Tell us why.
Because all of the foundations behind it are different. By definition, a bubble is a sheen of something with nothing in the middle, whereas all of the housing values we have now have the support to maintain themselves. If you went back to 2009, you were building houses that sat vacant, people were buying houses that had no renters. The problem wasn't that there were not enough houses and people needed to move in. There were too many unoccupied houses that nobody wanted, and this created a collapse. And so we're in an extremely different place. Lending practices are quite different. The kinds of loans that are out there are quite different, and I think we're in a different experience for that. If you want to reach back in time and correlate to something, go back in time to I think the Israeli-Arab War,
1979?
79. Go back to 79. There was this
Jerry remembers it
Israeli-Arab
well.
war, and although we didn't fight in the war, we gave Israel a bunch of weapons to defend themselves, and that angered several large oil-producing nations, which then cut off oil supplies to us. And you saw this huge increase in energy prices, which created a recession, which hit the middle class and created gas lines and
Odd even days.
and odd even days. And we had to, get Paul Volcker in as the head of the Fed, where he began ramping up interest rates until inflation came back down, and it had to go on for 7 years after the gas supply returned. That is the closest analog to where we are today. And that was not a crash of a particular financial market. It was a gumming up of the works of supply chain and product flow, and that flywheel whereby more consumers, stronger middle class creates more jobs, which creates a higher income, which creates opportunity for more commercial enterprise.
And Paul Volcker brought forward a very more aggressive Fed that had been.
He did. And if you go back to folks that have studied and love and, really are proponents of his strategy, they will tell you that until the interest rates exceed the inflation rate, you're going to continue to have an extreme cooling towards a recession. And we have not yet seen inflation rates drop under our current interest rates, nor have we raised the interest rates above. And what he did that lasted till about 78, 79, I think, before they moved on from him, is
88,
what we've...
89.
89?
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize. Is what we've been skating on with our 2% inflation ever since. And we also had the bump of some technology that came online that created a whole new industry to employ people and create economic growth.
You had a defense dividend there for a little while.
Yep. And we're waiting to see what's next. So are there things that are going to threaten home ownership? Absolutely. They're not the value of the homes. That's the ability of the economy to continue a wage that pays for the homeowner's life in the home they've already got. And that's what we want to see, because so much of our disposable income is disappearing into things that are necessary. And it does not help that we have such an expensive area to live in that is synonymous with the area where the jobs are. So that percentage of UVA's employees that are on assistance, some of why they're on assistance is because they're spending $200 a month in gasoline to drive back and forth from the place they can live.
Anything you guys want to add?
Well,
Good take, Quentin.
I called the time frame 2006-2009 the time of great unpleasantness.
You coined that.
Yeah. I would consider this current time to be the time of some uncomfortableness. It's a little bit different. It is not driven by the same issues. I like the idea that there is some real value under the bubble. It's more of an apple pie. There's meat there. And I think that it's the economic and regulatory constraints that exist are exacerbating the market. I do not see the market going below losing value. I do see significantly reduced appreciation. That's not a bad thing. That's a cooling residential real estate market. And that tends to continue to advance the wealth building of the nation. I think that we're really going to be seeing challenges in the shorter term with regard to fuel and heating. We're in the middle of a heat time now, but heating is going to be an issue. I was talking to two different large apartment owners that have a utility package as part of their rent.
Oof.
And they're putting in, their increases are 5 to 7% this year. And quite honestly, they may or may not have enough in the rent to cover the utility costs that the city is currently projecting. And that is a scary place for the mom and pop
Landlords.
Landlords.
Yeah.
And I know people don't
Which
like
we
the
need.
deal.
Which we need.
Right. We need landlords to go bad. I'm sorry, landlords are a business too. And they are housing providers. And a strong housing provider community helps build a strong community. I want people to be renters that want to be renters, and I want them to be treated well, but I also feel as though the property owners should be treated as well and understand the economic dynamics behind the rents.
I think much like we were talking about UVA, it's not helpful to create a villain
Demonize the property
where
owners.
one does not exist.
Right.
Well, there may be villains. I'm not suggesting that there's zero villains.
But not broad stroke.
But let's not broad stroke that all of these lay at
Yeah.
1 feet. And, I've spent a lot of time talking about what's happening across the country, and in bigger terms, if you want to talk about what do we do in Charlottesville to help strengthen the middle class and to help promote home ownership and unity, and the answer is you build. And more rentals helps, because then you have an option for people. Anything that allows folks that are making, I don't know, let's call it less than $50,000 a year. If you're making less than $50,000 a year, you don't even have a chance of buying a house in the city. And so now, if you're going to own a home, you have to move further out. Even if you're going to rent, what's the median price for a one-bedroom in the city?
About $1,200.
Yeah, I'd say $1,200.
$1,154.
Yeah.
I was right. It was
Yeah.
close.
It was very
That
close.
is up 13% from a year ago, which is
It's a lot
little
of money.
That also
For one bedroom.
reflects all of the
It also
MSA.
reflects all of them.
So
yes.
your university area has a higher increase than the two folks that I talked to were 5 to 7% in a little bit further out of the city, but rental properties in the urban ring.
And one of the steps to not that everybody should own, but if I want to take folks that can't own because they're living really far away, the intermediary step is to have affordable rentals for them to come closer, to reduce their cost of keeping the job that they need to have.
Well said. Well said. Betsy Hill Nugent, welcome to the show. We love when you watch, Betsy. It's always great to see you around town as well. Vanessa Parkhill for the panel. A couple more topics, guys, before we wind down. What impact, this is from Vanessa in Earlysville, what impact has the evolution of the Airbnb rentals had on the market? Seems to me that homes of all sizes are being scooped up by investors and used as short-term rentals. This results in fewer options for those who actually live and work in the area. I will say this, Albemarle County and the city of Charlottesville have pretty strict homestay rules. And you do, if you're going to utilize an Airbnb or a homestay, you have to live in them for half the year to be above board and licensed with the jurisdiction.
Unless you take a different zoning classification as a B&B.
Okay, which that's not what's happening with a lot of these. So Airbnbs in the market. Sean, you want to touch on this at all?
I would just say a little factoid. No, you should break it because it's yours.
No, go ahead.
No, we're not going to do that.
Come on, give us
No,
the-
we should talk about the serious. This is a much more serious show.
Give us the tidbit.
So Mike Signer, former mayor of Charlottesville, actually this is not related at all, except it is.
It's Airbnb.
Is now actually, Neil knows this more than I do. What's his position?
He's going to be a public policy director at
Airbnb.
At Airbnb. So that's interesting.
So formerly,
That's from Politico.
That's from
I wanna make
Politico.
sure.
Yep.
formerly the general counsel for Willow Tree Apps, Mike Signer, now at Airbnb. Lloyd Snook, as Neil let me know about this, posted this on his Facebook this morning. So that is news. That is news.
But going to the issue, no, I mean, it's clear that there are people who know how to work the system, and they know how to find the right house in the right place at the right time. And not that I've researched this or anything. And they manage to turn them into Airbnbs. There are whole businesses of people who do
Oh, yeah.
this. And, and they generally know how to work the rules. But of course, that's their right. People can buy property, and they can do this. And I think that as long as they're following the right steps and the city is able to get that transient lodging tax from it, then that's a form of income for the city. It does have those other issues, but I think that maybe that's an argument for multifamily units and more fourplexes, sevenplexes, et cetera, because those are less likely to turn into Airbnbs. I mean, I'm not sure. It's like, but do you see how much these things go for?
Oh my gosh, a lot of money. You
Why
want
are-
to touch on this?
Why are we so much less heated about Airbnbs, but our blood pressure goes through the roof when we talk about density?
Well, I think because density has issues. I mean, it's the same issues. It's the same effect of what happens with the neighbors. In the county, for instance, you hear stories with the Airbnbs about neighbors being upset for parties being thrown and loud noise.
Well, the density,
here
the density taxes infrastructure a little more than Airbnb.
and that's exactly it. So 28 units approved at the end of Valley Road Extended, where 6 could happen by right. This was a recent rezoning that was above the future land use map. That's 28 more units that are going to be on that road. As Mayor Snook said, that's a problem they'll just have to solve, because I think that was a 4-1 vote,
Yes.
3-2 vote. So that is the question before these, and it's going to be interesting though to see in 2 or 3 years when that's built. Does it have? And I'm going to tie this back to UVA for a second because it's a really interesting thing. That's 28 units on a road that's between me and Jonah over there.
Judah.
I'm sorry, Joda. You can
They're both in the Bible.
call me sane, but I'm not.
Yeah, but one got swallowed by a whale, right?
But
The other's a good book.
But what's interesting, though, is that the developer looked at the bike and pedestrian master plan from 2016, which clearly indicated that a pedestrian tunnel was going to go underneath the railroad tracks to connect to UVA. In an era where the city is hostile to the University of Virginia, that's never going to happen. But it's a great idea that potentially could make my entire neighborhood, I live in that neighborhood, I should say, much more accessible to the University of Virginia. A piece of infrastructure which could happen. All of this stuff is related and connected in a lot of ways, because 28 units there makes a lot of sense, except for maybe the infrastructure issues. But if you fixed it, look what happened with Stribling. 170 units that are going to be back there. Why? Because the city managed to figure out a way to get an infrastructure system in place to alleviate the density. So density has to be hand in hand with the infrastructure. And from what I'm seeing with the city of Charlottesville right now, it's positioning itself to be able to accomplish that.
And I would like to make sure that we don't lose a point in this.
Point.
The impact on total infrastructure of density is less than is sprawl.
Yeah. But you still have to mitigate it, and you still have to build it. And I think the
It has
county has
to-
done the same thing. Look at the investments in Crozet. Crozet has been able to grow a lot more and to be, you're from LA, so you would say pretty good. But the people there have you seen those CAC meetings? They get heated.
The bottom line, though,
Bottom line.
is concurrency of infrastructure is critically important. And we don't have concurrency of infrastructure in development today in Virginia, in Albemarle County, or in Charlottesville. The reality is that education, you cannot expand a school until you've lived in trailers for 10 years. That's not right.
Well, they're positioning them. It's interesting, though, because I think that the county is working. Again, it's how you work well with how well the systems work together. And the county has at least a plan in place for building the next 2 elementary schools, these high school centers. The city has the investment in Buford Middle School, which is on the way. So you're seeing it happen. The issue is that what happens when that system gets abused? And some might argue that transit proffer was an abuse of that system, which then potentially brings the whole credibility down. But I'm liking what I'm taking an opinion. I'm liking what I'm seeing from the city of Charlottesville, trying to get a handle on its inability to build infrastructure. I have a story last week all about this, which hopefully 2 of you will go look at.
No.
2. Well,
You got 2 people on this table right here that will go look at it.
Yeah, but
So many more than 2.
so that's happening, and then but that's, I think, is what, again, it gets back to the issue of who serves. You want people who can see the big system and can figure out how it all fits together.
And
But-
can understand that when you have a department or an issue internal to the development process that's not working, it's driving up the cost of your infrastructure.
Yeah, and I made a quip about this earlier, but it's true. The city is pausing building inspections, building permits and site inspections for 2 weeks because they don't have anybody. Now that's a job. And it kind of wonders who is training people to do those jobs. That would be a great. I don't know how to do that work, but I'm sure somebody that's a good job. Those pay pretty well, right?
So for 2 weeks, the city, who has the responsibility for building inspections and building permits, is taking a vacation, and there will be no activity. Is that what you're telling me?
It's
That's
not,
what he's
It's
saying.
not activity, but there was a press release, and I have it followed up. I've checked with the city this morning to see if it's extended, but there was a press release last week. Didn't you see it? Don't you read my work?
I did.
He's playing rhetorical. So through June 13th, there is a pause on new building inspections, but they had something in this, and actually, maybe you can shed some light on this for me. You can get a third-party inspection?
Yes.
That's something that sounds interesting. Why don't people take that route more often?
They do, but they often get back and they don't accept certain parts of the third-party inspection. So
Yeah.
all you've done is pay for an inspection that they don't allow.
And you've created a cost that gets passed on to the consumer.
And now, but here's a question, and this is a philosophical question. Who fixes that? Is that the city manager? Or is that the council? Or, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just throwing that out there. I know my answer, but I'm curious to know what you guys think.
I'm of a firm belief that Charlottesville leadership of Charlottesville staff is well aware of the problems based on conversations that have been had. I don't believe they've solved the problems. They're well aware of them. Awareness is the first part. I have a fair amount of confidence in the folks that are in those higher staff positions today, and I believe they will solve the issues. That being said, it's going to be a bumpy ride until the end of summer. If you've got a project where you need to get an electrical permit so you can move to the next step, and you've got to wait until June 13, that just means you are dead in the water.
Yeah, it's going to be a bumpy ride for a number of departments. City manager is a team member of the Robert Bob Group, essentially a consultant, and now they're hiring a consultant to find the new police chief. So consultant city manager hires consultant to find the new police chief.
Well, that's just a search. I mean, that's a search firm. That's common.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a common thing. I think that job, I think that the RFP calls for a lot of public engagement, so there is that aspect to it as well.
It would be more common if the city manager was permanent that was hiring the police chief.
But the person hiring the police chief is not the city manager. The city manager is coordinating as the executive the search. City council actually hires the police chief, if I'm remembering. the
In this
organization.
circumstance,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
normally it's the city
And
manager.
normally it is, but
that
in this
hires the police
circumstance,
chief.
as an interim, it's not.
Vanessa Parkhill says amazing knowledge with the panel, and she loves the panel. Keith in Connecticut is championing the land trust.
He's in Norwalk, you know.
He says he is in Norwalk, that is right. I am working with the city of Portland and Seattle, Keith says, using the land trust model we created here. The land trust owns the land under the ADU unit. The land trust will rent the auxiliary dwelling unit to an affordable housing tenant. The owner stays in their home, receives substantial tax credits and a portion of the ADU rent. It helps with the affordable housing and gentrification. If the city of Charlottesville and Elmore County allows nonprofits to use ADUs to meet the affordable housing needs, that will help.
Every bit will help, and there's not a silver bullet, I've been told. It's
Is there a silver buckshot? Imagine that.
You need
Is that
many
Robert
things.
Liberty?
Robert Liberty. It's not Keith Smith. It's
Right,
Robert
it's
Liberty.
Robert Liberty. I feel like I know Robert Liberty. His name comes up so much on the show. And in the words of the always intelligent Neil Williamson, more housing everywhere for everyone. And there's a hashtag that goes with that. All right, gentlemen, to close the program here, how about a final take? And please let us know, Sean, as you go first, of where we can read and support you and engage with your content.
Happy summer. InfoSeville.com is one place to go. Charlottesville Community Engagement is the newsletter and podcast, but InfoSeville is where the archive is. It's easier to find stories, and of course, I write a lot of them. A lot of them are kind of boring, but of course, I try not to tell people what to think. Just want people to read and understand how things like smart scale work and transportation, because I
love it.
Because the whole point is I want a that's the word, but civic literacy maybe is what I'm looking for about these issues, because it is really easy to blow stuff up by saying, well, you haven't done this, so kill the whole project. And again, to go back to that Fry Spring rezoning, that was a really interesting thing that happened, and I hope we get more of that. And I think we probably that collaboration, if that makes any sense. But I do think that I'm rambling.
No, you're not rambling.
Yeah.
InfoSeville.com. Sean Tubbs does great work. We read his content regularly. We would love to see Sean Tubbs maybe even do a column from time to time.
But if you really want
this is it.
You really want to have the full Tubbs experience, listen to the podcast. It is really worthwhile. click on it and listen to it at least once, because you'll find that Sean does some great voices when he is, rather than gathering actualities, he does voices, and it provides humor throughout the day.
I think it's pretty funny, too.
It's economy. I mean, I did this when the pandemic started. I felt people needed information about that, about public health issues, and of course I was a journalist for a long time, then I wasn't, and I wanted to get back to it, and here I am trying to make it work, which is exciting. Thank you for having me.
QB, any thoughts, my friend, to close?
I do. I think, one, I really enjoy a lot of our city councilors. I enjoyed the Board of Supervisor folks. Please don't anybody walk away thinking I hate them. I think there's so much that because of community involvement, because of UVA, because of the people that work and breathe and make Charlottesville what it is, that it's an amazing place. And I would love the opportunity for more people to be able to spend more time in it, less time on roads, and really be a part of it. And I hope that as we go through and we look around and we talk about our leaders, that the leaders and us remember that the gift of Charlottesville comes from the folks that give of their time and their lives and their support here, and that at no point do we put the gift above the giver.
Well said. Look at you. Neil Williamson, you got to follow that right there.
That's not easy to do.
That's not easy.
I will say that the strength of this community is the people of this community and the people that will be of this community. And I would love, the folks that watch this show tend to be very involved in the community. There are openings in all of these communities for folks on boards and commissions to make a difference. If you want to be involved, there's a place for you. And I just hope that some folks would reach out to me, Neil at freeenterpriseforum.org. Let me know what you're interested in. I'm happy to steer you in the direction of a government or non-governmental committee that is making a difference in the community. Our strength is our people, and we need to embrace it, and we need to represent it, and we need to continue to build more homes everywhere for everyone.
Can I just ask a follow-up?
Oh, please.
Would you tell any of those people to sit on a community advisory committee?
I don't think he would. I think
will-
we're
I will-
clear where he is with the CAC.
I will tell you, I have friends sitting on citizen advisory committees, and I tell them, thank you for your service. I am going to continue to work for the elimination of this committee.
Now, I only joke because part of the work I do is
Mark
actually the
is
same
watching
thing.
the
Part of the same thing is to get that is to have people choose to get involved, and that usually starts with an appointed body. It's really, from my experience, I've noticed that you're a much more effective legislator if you have previously sat on one of these committees. Not always, but generally it's a good place, and I'm really glad that I get a lot of notes from people saying, I didn't even know this thing existed until you reported on it. So that's that.
We appreciate your work, Sean. Neil Williamson, we appreciate you very much in the Free Enterprise Forum. Quentin Beckham, the principal of Keller Williams Alliance. Good guy. Happy birthday to Quentin Beckham.
Thank you very much.
So if you see Quentin Beckham around town, please wish him a very kind happy birthday. Judah Wickhauer is behind the camera and keeps us online. For Quentin, Neil, and Sean, my name is Jerry Miller, and this is Real Talk with Keith Smith. You can find all his shows, even the ones he is not on realtalkwithkeithsmith.com. Fantastic new website. Guys, enjoy the weekend. Keep it local. Read the Free Enterprise Forum and Info Seville ASAP. Have a good weekend.
Not ASAP, because that's Advocates for Sustainable Albemarle Population that I
As
don't.
soon as possible.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care.
Because, are we off?
We are off.
I apologize for everything I said.